go back to that place again.
That's one thing I'm actually kind of fearful of in moving over to Europe is the coffee is not good.
Fucking awful.
Like
man.
Most of the places are, but there is the rare, you might find a nice cafe or something in a city, and you might get the rare one where it's quite a good one or close to sort of New Zealand, but overall, yeah, pretty rubbish, pretty bad.
Big time.
There's no artisans over there. It's their opinion largely on coffee is similar to mine, really. They take it if they have to because they need something from it, which means it's just powder at the bottom of a cup with some hot water that doesn't really do much but mulches it up, maybe a bit of milk to offset it, but otherwise it's just a cup of mud. That's where the expression for coffee, cup of mud, comes from. The UK, because literally they do nothing other than like make it look like muddy water.
You think? I thought it might have come from the trenches or something in World War One, where they
actually just drink
mud. Yeah, the mud might have probably got in there, so it was about 1/3 mud, literal mud. But
that could be it.
Yeah, it's pretty brutal. Like, most places I went to, especially on mainland Europe, I'll be honest, when I was in the UK, I mostly drink tea. It just sort of brings it out in me.
Do as the Romans do.
Yeah, back on the tea. Yeah, exactly. So when I was in mainland Europe and I was back on the coffees, yeah, it was pretty gross, but they were cheap at the same time. So I was like, it's not too bad. 80 cents in the Czech Republic for a coffee. I'm not complaining.
Yeah, that's not bad. Yeah. Anyway, we should probably plan what we're going to do.
Good afternoon and welcome back to the Overcast Gamer Show. My name is Abe Foster. I am joined by
Reagan Harper,
Balthazar Valentine,
and we're back to discuss all things gaming and otherwise in the land of the long white cloud. I'm I don't know when when was the last time we did a podcast? What, 3 weeks? No. 4 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks?
Probably more.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah, probably more, all due to my selfishness. I have been literally trying to sell everything I own, and
you're trying to flee the country is what you're trying to do.
Yeah, that's exactly right. I'm trying to flee the country. I'm also I was engaged in another artistic endeavor, I suppose I call it. I've been in a band since the last year of high school, and we sort of been known as doing a gig once every 4 years, around about there.
Prolific, I like it.
Yeah, very, very much so. And we recorded a track in 2012, and then we always wanted to have something properly immortalized, so on Spotify, on iTunes, or whatever. And late last year, I went back to Wellington of a weekend and we recorded in a cargo container in Tawa, which had been decked out to be a recording studio, and recorded 2 tracks. And now they're up on Spotify, and I played a gig in just out of Masterton. It wasn't in Masterton, but in around Masterton as a sort of final send-off, I suppose, because I'm moving to Scotland in late June. So
how
I'm
was
officially
that gig? Because I would imagine that playing a gig just out of Masterton is a pretty surreal experience.
It is. It felt very familiar to me because I went to a lot of those gigs back in the day. I'm from Masterton, of course, not something I like to readily admit, but I am. And so I went to a lot of those gigs back in the day. A few sort of noteworthy ones. They were usually at things like school halls or other venues that someone had rented out in some way, shape or form, and usually some glass would get smashed, someone would get punched. Those sorts of things occurred on a regular basis. I remember one particular stint where I ended up drunk on gin listening to Limp Bizkit in a car with about 8 other people. So that sounds
exactly what I would expect, and quite sort of similar to I guess my formative teenage years as well. Except generally they weren't in any kind of structure that you would expect. They were more like wool sheds and things like that.
Oh man, yeah, I've had a few of those as well. Yeah, just random garages and sheds and
just nasty, Just nasty. Yeah.
Nasty, but at the same time, it feels homely to me. Those sorts of like bogan ass, dirty parties.
Yeah,
I
weirdly
love them,
wholesome. Weirdly
they
wholesome.
Are.
Yeah,
I get a lot out of them. Yeah, just like you see people kind of just lingering around a concreted garage, sipping on like
Cody's.
Smirnoff Ice or Cody's or whatever, and it's just I don't know. It does my heart well, being in that sort of atmosphere and with those sorts of people. But no, it was really good. We played with a band we've been friends with. They've had a few different sort of iterations. Like there's been 2 constant members, and they've chopped and changed through a few bands throughout the years. They're now known as Pen Caro, and they're a sort of progressive metal band and we're really good mates with 2 of the guys. So they asked us to join them on their final show of their North Island tour. They did Auckland, and they did Marston was the last one. They did Auckland, Taupo, Hamilton, a bunch of different places, and of course wanted to make Marston the final one on the bill.
As you do.
Yep. So as you do. Yeah, it's where everything's happening in New Zealand. So Marston.
For those people who are listening, perhaps from overseas, it is not where everything is happening.
No, it's the. I'm trying to think of an equivalent. Balthazar, just from the background of what I've given about Marston, is there a place in the UK you could compare it to?
Maybe somewhere like Eastbourne or something.
Yeah, is that down around near Plymouth? Like that sort of...
It's just a very unevolved area.
Brilliant.
A lot of, big foreheads, slack jaws, that kind of thing.
Yeah, so I wouldn't go devolved, just never really got there in the first place.
Yeah. I wouldn't go that far because I do have a soft spot. People are stuck in their ways and they're happy about it, I would say, about Marston for sure. But I do like coming back. Everything makes sense to me. Everything is simple and moves at a glacial pace, and I quite like that after being, in Auckland and the Big Smoke and even Welly for most of my life, sort of thing. So yeah, no, it's very good fun, and it was nice to see the boys and see catch up with a whole bunch of people who I went to school with before heading off into God knows where and for God knows how long. So that's pretty cool.
Nice.
But yeah, what about you guys? What have you been up to in our sort of hiatus?
So this is going to sound like I'm being on repeat, but more painting.
Nice.
More painting.
3rd, 4th coat. You must be on about the 7th coat by now, Reagan.
Yeah. Well, you'd think that. The issue is that we're just kind of taking long breaks between coats, which does not make for a fast paint job.
Right.
But just more domestic shit for me. I have recently made it my thing to build like a firewood storage area.
Oh wow.
So like I've got a bunch of pallets and I've built it out of pallets, and so I had to actually put that on hold to come and do the podcast today because I'm currently putting a roof on it. So that's my
Mr.
life.
DIY.
Yeah, that's my life. This is how I do these days.
Where'd you source the pallets from, Reagan?
So we had a few here. So the guy who lived in the place before us was a little bit of a hoarder, and he'd sort of partway constructed his own firewood storage out of pallets, but he didn't kind of plan it out, I think you could say. So it was all just,
right.
It was kind of like pallets leaned against one another with some wood in between. Whereas I've kind of planned it out and I've made it square, and I'm putting a roof on it and things like that, so that it actually does what it needs to do. But I did need to source a few, and it took a while, but I found on Facebook Marketplace a shop down in Petone who was just like, hey, we have pellets. If you need any, just drop in and come and grab some. And I went in there, and I'm like, hey man, I saw on Facebook, like, you guys have got pellets and things that you're giving away. And the young guy in there was like, pretty sure that ad's been up for like 6 months and you're the first person to come in, which is awesome. So yeah, sourced a couple from there, and we're away laughing. So Yeah, basically that's the kind of shit that I do now. Painting and hammering things together.
Very domesticated.
Yeah, man. It's it's
Isn't it nice to be A, outside and B, literally building something?
It is.
Isn't that a good feeling?
It actually really is. Like, I think you miss it. So like when you're kind of tied to a desk, right, in your day job.
Yeah.
It is kind of nice to be inside on rainy days and things like that, and you look outside and you've got a big window. Like I sit next to a window, which is nice. But you do feel very much like you're not achieving anything with your hands. There's something quite human about doing things with your hands.
Absolutely.
So it's quite cool to get out and get handy for a bit, and see the result, I suppose. So, yeah.
It's I don't think a hard day's work, manual labor, is to be understated, because I had the same thing when I went home and visited my folks. My dad has a big sort of food forest thing going on, so there's all sorts of different food planted all over the shop.
He just put like a bunch of like sawdust down and food's just
wood chips. Chips. So he got onto this idea from he gets on YouTube tangents and sort of believes everything he hears at the same time. But he was actually spot on with whatever this was, because he discovered that you could just grow veggies and fruit in wood chips, and it makes weeding intensely, it's not hard anymore, sort of thing. You can just pull the weeds straight out of the wood chips.
Awesome.
And it also stops them growing up, because they have to do, they have to have more energy to get up and through the wood chips. So I was back home for about a week, I think, maybe 5 days, and pretty much 4 out of 5 days, I was doing 4 to 5 hours of manual labor of threshing and harvesting and whatnot, and just had my headphones on for a lot of the time, or had my mini speaker going, listen to podcasts, listen to music. I had a whale of a time. Yeah. I'm telling you now, that was so good, and it helps. The weather was fantastic. And
good for the soul.
And the Whited Upper.
Good for the soul.
Yeah,
I feel like
really
you come
is.
away like a little bit recharged, weirdly, but yeah.
You definitely do, and it's just that feeling of having achieved something. I think that's huge. Like, that's not to be understated. As someone who has canned their job and been sort of twisting in the wind for the last sort of 5 months, trying to figure out what I'm doing, it can't be understated how much having a purpose, that is necessary as a human being.
My mental image for your kind of life at the moment is you're one of those big floppy things that they have at car sales yards.
The wacky waving inflatable arm flailing tube man.
Yeah, that's it. One of those guys. That's like a metaphor for your life at the moment, which is great.
You're pretty much bang on, Reagan. It's that's exactly what's happening. And although it doesn't feel good until you have I'll say I was pretty down in the dumps until I decided to make the move.
Yeah.
Decided I really needed to go, sort of thing, and I was just trying to just flitting around trying to figure out what it all meant. There was lots of existential questions coming up, and spending too much time alone with yourself, never a good thing. I would say, never a good thing.
Agreed.
So yeah, once I sort of I was talking to a mate, and he sort of said to me, look, I know you want to go over there, so why don't you just do it? And I suppose that's all I needed to hear. And I was like, shit, man, you're absolutely right. And then I just started. It was instantaneous. As soon as he said that, and as soon as I realized that, I felt immediately better. It's just incredible how much we need a purpose. We need something to be driving towards. It was kind of fun doing a scientific study on myself. While I was out of work and whatnot, I sort of analyzed myself and watched my moods and things like that, and even so much as going outside. If I went outside, I would feel a hell of a lot better. So I made it my mission to at least, go for a hour to 2 hour walk every day or something like that, just to not feel like a bag of shit. But yeah,
that's what life is about. That's what life is about, is not feeling like a bag of shit.
It's been really interesting, and I think it's been a learning experience for me. And it's been horrible at times, I'm not going to lie. But it's also been really eye-opening, and I feel like I understand myself and just human psyches in general a little bit more, which is quite cool. But yeah, that got really deep really fast. Balthazar, what have you been up to?
Speaking of ticking things off, I every now and again I just have a stint where I get sick of the amount of stuff piled up. You know how there's stuff that you can easily keep under control if you keep doing it, but as soon as you go like one day without, all of a sudden it just builds up too much and you're like, shit, now I'm going to have to actually find some time to dedicate to putting this right again. So recently I've just been doing an obscene amount of loads of washing and dishwasher loads and vacuuming and surface cleaning, and just, I don't like living in a mess, but when you do have habits that, if not checked, can lead to it. Like, for example, Hannah and I are both really bad at, every time you get a drink, you get a new glass. Even if it's the same drink, you don't pour it in the same glass. You just had it. So with stuff like that, shit builds up quickly. And it had been at one of those points for a while where it actually took me 4 straight days, because I had some sickness recently as well, so I had a couple of days off work, and I literally spent 4 straight days doing it, and it took that amount to get rid of everything and get it back to a level where now, when you finished with a plate or whatever, you put it in the dishwasher. If the dishwasher's full, turn it on, unload it, and then everything can go in one by one again. Basket empty, until it's full enough to do a load, and then do a load of laundry, drying, take it out. So really it's just been getting back into that routine from literally maybe leaving it 1 or 2 days without doing it because I was busy. Just building up to the point that it took almost a week to get everything back under control.
Wow.
So it's also more difficult when you live with someone who has a habit of seeing that there's no dirty dishes, so decides to just do a marathon amount of baking and use every single dish in the house. That can make things hard as well. But
you get baking out of it, man. So
I was going to say, you reap the rewards of that one. That's awesome.
Yeah. So no, just ticking off the list of basic household chores recently, really.
I kind of I in my household, this is gonna paint a really bad picture, but I'm kind of bad in a way that let's say I'll make toast, and I'll make the toast, and then once the toast is buttered and peanut buttered, is ready to go, and I sit down on the couch and I eat it. What that leads to is often forgetting to put the marge and the peanut butter away, and so then it ends up with a knife and the 2 things of those just sat on the bench,
and probably your filthy crumbs all over it as well.
Yeah, I'm just a mess. And in my household, it's kind of that'll sit there for a while, and then within there'll just be a reminder. It'll just be hey, can you just sort that out on the bench? Because
your partner will say that to you.
Yeah, which is awesome. And but I tell you what, it's hard to build up, or it's hard to change habits. That's just been my habit, is always just to be I'll just eat my toast now and I'll get to that later. And I usually do. I'll get to it later on that day. But man, it is difficult to change how you operate.
Yeah. It's a fundamental thing, right? You have to get really in there.
Yeah, big time. You've really got to. Yeah, I don't know how. It's just you've got to have someone remind you or make you feel bad for it, which is fair enough. To change that habit. It's weird.
It's funny, Reagan, because I come at this from your partner's position. That's the sort of person I am. If I make something, everything gets cleaned, everything gets washed before I consume it. If I'm cooking dinner or something, I'll do all the dishes before I eat because I just can't stand the thought of them just sitting there.
Yeah, nice. And that's a good way to be. But yeah, I am just not like that, and it's taken a bit of work. Yeah.
Yeah, it's funny, when we were all sort of, early 20s or whatever, flatting and figuring shit out. If, say, I used to flat with people who were, a bit like that. Someone might leave the worst example of this is when someone left a banana skin on the couch, and I was just
on
the couch. I was just in my head. I didn't say anything about it, but me and my other flatmate, we'd had enough at that point, and we left a real passive aggressive note.
Oh, good. That's definitely the best way to handle that situation.
Oh man, that's brutal. Those sort of hoops that you have to jump through when you're flatting in your early 20s are man, looking back, hilarious, but at the time, it's not fun.
It's funny how you can kind of sort of, like these days, if it happened these days, you'd be like, hey man, can you just chuck that in the bin? And then the person would be like, yeah, sweet, no worries. But back in the day, you leave it for so long that it becomes this big thing, and you're like, all right, the only solution is a note. It's the only, because I can't have that conversation. I can't talk to them directly. That's a situation.
I'm curious as to, because you and me have that mentality, Reagan. I think we're sort of avoid conflict. Balthazar, would you have the same thing?
No.
Yeah, I didn't think so. Yeah, you just hit them up straight away, sort of thing.
Yeah, I'd just be like, fucking sort your shit out. Why is there a banana peel on the couch?
See, and I envy that. I really wish I could be more like that, but it's generally, I'm like, avoid conflict at all costs.
To be fair, though, the couches are pretty, like...
well, that was the fight, that was the straw that broke the camel's back sort of thing. There was always dirty dishes in the sink and stuff like that, but then once the banana skin turned up on the couch, I was like, look, it's not a tip face. Like, we're not living in squalor.
We're not playing fucking Mario Kart here.
Yeah, yeah. There's a difference between dirtiness and untidiness, and I can get it. I'm fine with untidiness. Like, it doesn't it doesn't hurt me. It doesn't destroy my peace of mind. But dirtiness, man, that's not on.
Yeah.
But I suppose we should probably talk about some video games. We've been rambling on for a wee while.
We have.
I haven't been playing anything because I no longer own even a television. So, I mean, I have my Nintendo Switch, and I also have access to buy Donkey Kong Tropical Freeze, which I think, Balthazar, you might talk about in a wee bit. Mm-hmm. But I also refuse to pay $90 at this point for it. I think I might treat myself once I've sold my car and buy it. But it's my sort of way. I've conditioned myself to feel really guilty whenever I spend money. So I need to do something for myself, i.e. selling my car, before I can treat myself with something like that. So you guys want to talk about what you've been playing?
Yeah, I'm gonna jump in and go first. And well, I don't know, because I haven't heard Balthazar's kind of recent thoughts on this, but we might end up in a little bit of a debate about this. But I'm going to talk about God of War for a little bit, and my impression of it. And
okay.
I mean, a lot of what I'll say is perhaps stuff that, if you've been reading about God of War online and read reviews and things like that, it'd be similar to what you've read there. Because to be honest, I adore this game. And that's, I don't know, I hadn't expected to. And I've been...
What sort of level of adoration are we talking, Reagan? Are we talking like close to Red Dead Redemption levels?
Well... See, this is the thing. I think I adore it as much as I can adore it for a game that's kind of outside of my typical, like, genre, I suppose.
Okay.
Like, typically for me, and you guys will know, open world games are my jam. Third person open world games, love that shit. Breath of the Wild, Rockstar games, those kind of things. And so... this is kind of why I was sort of surprised to really love God of War as much as I did, because I guess it's third person and that kind of thing, but I was sort of surprised by the amount of enjoyment that I got out of this, and I've sort of been trying to think about like what it is about it that led to it. And there's probably lots of contributing factors, but I think the overall thing is really just the level of polish with this game. It's just really, people talk about whether it's got this whole kind of single one take thing going on. So there's never like a camera cut or anything like that. The whole game is kind of...
it's one giant tracking shot kind of thing.
Yeah, exactly. There's even cool things like there's like the fast travel aspect of the game where you can use it's fairly limited, but you use these kind of gateways to travel between specific points, and so you can never just fast travel to a spot. You've kind of got to plan out your route and use these gateways, and they do that by the whole kind of single shot thing. By you walk up to the gateway, it gives you a menu, you choose where you want to go, you walk through the gateway, and it kind of puts you into this sort of like limbo loading thing. But you're still walking around and you're controlling Kratos. But it gives the console enough time to kind of load that next area, and then you walk through a portal and you're in that next area. And it's just, I I don't know. It's just that level of polish. Things like
Is it sort of that limbo area? I'm imagining the Assassin's Creed sort of where you're just running around.
It's a proper area picture. I mean, it's not a spoiler. Everyone who knows Norse mythology knows Yggdrasil, the world tree, that spans across the entire world. You're basically walking along something akin to the branches of the world tree to get from one spot to another. So it's actually a fully realized area. Like it's kind of grey. The color palette's washed out because it's also kind of ethereal and in between dimensions sort of thing. But no, it's a fully realized area that you're kind of walking across the branches of the world tree.
Yeah,
awesome.
Yeah, so it works. Like it works really well within kind of the mythology, and it's that plus the one thing that jumps out at me as well is kind of like the way that the dialogue works really well. So you might walk up and interact with actually a better example is you'll jump in your wee boat and Kratos and Atreus will be having a conversation about something, and you'll get halfway through that dialogue and you might get off the boat and they'll go, actually, we'll carry on talking about this later. And then 2 hours later when you get back on your boat, Atreus will be like, hey, you remember we were talking about that thing? And you'll carry on from where you left off. And so it's just a small example, but lots of little things like that are just done really well.
Stories are for the boat boy.
That's a lesson they've probably learned from Uncharted 4, I would say. Do you guys remember when they did that in the Jeep when you're driving around? They were talking, and then if you bump into something, or if you jump out and run around and come back, they'll be like, as I was saying, and they'll have all these sort of little prompts. So that's really cool. I like that. Yeah,
it feels a little bit less clunky than that, though. I don't know. I think the major difference was that they split it up into large chunks. So if you were, the dialogue would be like a longer line kind of thing. And if you got off your boat, they'd carry on talking for a little bit, maybe 20 seconds or so. And then they go, actually, but let's, and so you'd be running around and then they'd go, let's talk about this later. Whereas in Uncharted, it's kind of like they would cut it off at the end of any sentence that they were on.
Yeah.
And so they didn't close the statement or close the sort of portion of the story, and then you'd get back on, they'd be like, as I was saying, and then and it just felt a little bit more disjointed, whereas this was kind of done in I think that's the way that they did it, is they had larger spans of dialogue, and it just sort of tied everything together a little bit better. But if hopefully that makes sense. But anyway, I think the main thing is at the very core of it is obviously just the gameplay, the kind of battle mechanics. It's just really fun. It's a bit more Souls-like, I want to say, in that it's a bit harder. You're not just cleaving through enemies willy-nilly, and so you have to be a little bit more careful, a little bit more patient with your fighting and things than you would in previous iterations, or from what I can remember. Balthazar, you can totally correct me on that if you like, but it's a bit harder, and you need to be a little bit more careful, and there's just something really fun about it. And I won't talk about story, but the story is still quite good in the way that they kind of explore Kratos as a fucking dad, which is a weird thing.
It
kind of works.
He was always a dad.
His former family was murdered horribly
by him.
By him.
Yeah, true.
Yeah, let's not leave that fact out.
Yeah. Anyway, he's doing a better job this time around, shall we say? But yeah, so I don't know. It's just lots of really refined, well polished areas coming together for me to make it really nice. And kind of an example of like the level of polish that a game can get to, and that sort of stands of itself. So been playing it. I did kind of commit in my mind to try and platinum this game, which is something that I never do. I'm not a completionist. But now that I'm into the late game grind, I'm not sure that I will. Like there's just some trophies where I'm like, oh, this is what getting a platinum trophy is all about, right? It's just like pushing through that grind, and that's just not.
It's never appealed to me because, in my opinion, it will make me end up hating the game, which I don't want to leave a game on that note. Like, I want to finish a story and be like, that was really good, and then have to think about it for days, months, weeks, years after and not have to go back and see it as a game, see it as, getting these little artificial constructs fulfilling these tasks or whatever. See it as how it affected me, as opposed to, this is a game and I activated this mechanic and that did this sort of thing. Like,
yeah, totally. It does, when you're getting to that point, it is kind of boiling it down to, very much the clunky nature. You start to see that it is just a game and it's just a bunch of stuff.
See the strings sort of thing.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
That's, without getting too deep into it, God of War, great game. I wouldn't say that it's something that everyone should play, but I think it is one of those games you should definitely give a crack if you've got a PlayStation and you don't have anything to play, because it's great. It's up there. It'll be, Game of the Year contender for sure.
Ooh. Well, I mean, Balthazar, you played this one as well, so do you want to add in your thoughts on God of War, man?
God of War, God of 4 is a great game, but it's a far cry from the masterpiece that it's being portrayed as by the majority of reviewers.
Hot take from Balthazar.
I give it an 8.
In the YouTube blurb.
Sure. you gave it an 8, you said?
I give it an 8. It bumped up to an 8 from a 7. For the first half of the game, it was sitting at a 7 for me. Bumped up to an 8 after I'd finished it. It's... Okay, the first thing I'll say, I mean, obviously you guys know it, but the rest of the internet can be dumb, so I'll preface the whole thing by saying this is my opinion, based on the sort of games that I play, and the sort of games that I enjoy, and the character tropes and story tropes that I enjoy. Those are what, informed my review of this game.
Right.
For me, the combat was unenjoyable, and it is the bulk of the game. Now, it gets good. About 10 hours in, the combat gets good. The problem is, when you start with just the axe and no upgrades, it's very plain. As Reagan said, it is going for a Souls-like feel, but Souls-like gameplay would be boring as fuck if you didn't get to pick whatever weapon you want to use and have your moveset change based on that weapon and actually find a gameplay style that suits you and that you enjoy. And that's what the first 10 hours is a stretch, maybe 5 hours of God of War is. You just have one weapon and one moveset. And as someone who probably more than 50% of the games they play are games that use this combat style, I need more than just one moveset and one weapon if you're just giving me the same copy-paste gameplay that I play most of the time in other games. That said, when it does open up, when you get more weapons, when you get more abilities, when you kind of get your full repertoire, it is one of the more refined and, I guess, perfected examples of this type of gameplay. In my opinion, it just takes far too long to get there, and it makes the start of the game a bit of a chore to play rather than fun for me.
Ah, okay.
Interesting.
So this is an action RPG, right? We'd say
that's right.
Yeah. So we'd compare this to, I guess, I mean, people keep saying Dark Souls, and it's kind of getting a bit old at this point, but that's probably pretty apt. So the customization opens up a lot after that first hurdle sort of thing.
Pretty much when you get your second weapon, it's not tied intrinsically to getting the second weapon, but when you get your second weapon is also around the same time that you start being able to craft and customize and upgrade a lot of your, they're called runic attacks, and sort of your axe hilts, and just your various things that decide what moves you get and what element you attack with and what extra additive benefits you have from your attacks and stuff like that.
Right.
It all kind of ties into about the same time as you get your second weapon. So up until then, you're playing with a very limited pool of abilities. And that's, A, it's not God of War, but B, it's not a good example of how to build the sort of game they were going for with that gameplay style and combat style. And it works for some people. Obviously, if you're not someone who's experienced in that area, you don't play a lot of those games, like Reagan, for example, that's not a limitation to you. You still enjoy it because you still enjoy that style of gameplay, which maybe you didn't know you enjoyed before because other games maybe that used it were too hard or had other aspects of them that you just didn't find fun, so you never got into them. But as someone who has sampled pretty much every game out there that draws from this, this style of gameplay, it it was very limited, and it did actually deduct from my enjoyment until it opened up and gave me those customization options, which unfortunately was, it's not, maybe a third of the way through the game.
Okay.
So yeah, it was quite long of me not really enjoying it. I think another thing this game suffers from is the opening hour is so good that the next 7 hours, meh. Like,
the old
it
opens
opens.
3 issue, yeah.
It opens phenomenally. You know, you got several back-to-back boss fights which just escalate more and more in intensity and over-the-topness. And then once you've done the final one, and I guess you begin your actual quest, it's the beginning of a quest, you know? You're just walking from place to place, talking to people and trying to get to where you ultimately want to go.
See,
like, it's very plain
that
Jane boring.
What I enjoyed about that bit was that you start to get a sense of the scale of the game. And I sort of was just like, yeah, as it slowed down a bit, I started to see that, like, how the game, like the levels and things were going to work. And how the world itself was kind of opening up as I got through it, and I kind of enjoyed it for that aspect of it. But
did you continue to enjoy it for that sole thing for the 7 or so hours that it did that until it started to ramp up again?
Don't know. Probably not.
Let me ask you guys, just to get an idea of the world in this game, the world design. Is it, because for some reason in my mind I'm imagining a Bloodborne-esque thing where everything's interconnected and there's big areas but everything sort of circles back on itself? Is it anything like that?
It's more biome, I'd say.
Okay, so Horizon Zero Dawn.
Everything does link back and you do go through things, but typically throughout the course of the game you're not going to be doing a massive amount of looping back to areas you've been to until you get to the end. It is pushing on to new areas constantly. I don't know. That's my take on it. Regan, you sounded like you maybe did agree a bit more with.
Yeah, so I kind of think of it as like you've got like, so there's a lake essentially, and then there's kind of areas around that lake that you can visit, and I sort of think of each area as being its own sort of enclosed, Castlevania-ish type thing where you know, you go through it, you look back around and blah blah blah, their own kind of little physical puzzles and things like that. So it's, I don't know, to me it's kind of kind of a collection of those sorts of areas, and then within each of those areas there's smaller instances of those as well.
Is it Tomb Raider? Is Tomb Raider what's the most recent one? Shadow of the Tomb? No. Is it Shadow of the Tomb Raider?
Rise Shadow's not out yet, I don't think. Rise of the Tomb Raider.
Yeah. Is it like that? Does it feel like that kind of thing?
Maybe it's hard to describe, to be honest, or hard to draw a comparison, I think.
Have you played Metroid Fusion? Honestly, I think Nintendo games are the closest comparison to it, where the lake that Regan described is kind of like the hub that you use to access levels, and then the rest of the game is the levels that when you complete them, you go back to the hub, and you can then re-access those levels if you want to and go back to them later with different gear to access secret areas, but ultimately it's just a hub that you're using to go to the next level.
Guacamelee and that sort of thing? Like that design? Okay, cool. I gotcha. I understand it a bit more now. One thing I wanted to ask both of you guys, you will both know that I'm a huge fan of puzzles, and you mentioned that before. How do those play out in this game? Are they intelligently, implemented throughout the game? Do they serve the gameplay at all? What's going on?
I would say that they're a non-entity. Really, there's one or two. I'll give it that. There's a couple tied to story progression, which are fun, but it's not really a puzzle game. The puzzles typically consist of something like find some runes in an area to unlock a chest or something like that.
Collectathon.
Finding them is basically see it somewhere and then throw your axe at it to smash it, because it's still God of War, so you just break shit to get what you want.
I actually, just on that point, I do enjoy the animation that they've made for, and I can't remember, is this the same in the earlier games? When you open a chest, you're not really opening a chest, you just punch it in, smashing it to pieces.
So in the old God of Wars, he used to go and you used to tap circle, and he used to pull it up. So it's cool that he just smashes through it.
Yeah, in some of the newer old God of Wars, he did just punch the top and then rip it open just like rip it in half
It's
and like
just so
ascension
Oh, is that
and
right?
stuff. Yeah.
Oh, is that like the Chains of like the PSP ones and stuff like that?
It was Ascension on PS3,
Oh, okay. Oh,
which
right.
was a prequel one. Yeah.
Yeah, I only ever played sort of the core God of Wars, I suppose. But I really like that. That's quite a cool wink and a nod to the old circle mashing days of God of War 1 and God of War 2, where you're opening doors, opening chests was just tap circle as fast as you possibly can, or even performing kills was the same thing. Just tap circle.
But yeah, I guess I have two more thoughts on it. One is, again, it all comes down to the same thing. This game is good by the end, but it takes too long to get going. Again, for the first third or so of the game, there's no story. There's an objective, but there's no story. There's obstacles in your way that cause you to divert from your objective on a fetch quest, but it's still not a story. It's an objective with barriers in the way that you have to overcome. Those, it feels like there should be more. I mean, I know I'm relatively alone in this. I know that Mike is the only other person who has similar feelings about this to me, but an objective is not a story.
I do kind of agree with you on that, to be honest. Like, you don't sort of start to get embroiled in the wider themes of it until later in the game, for sure. Yeah.
Yeah, it's pretty much when you complete that initial objective, that is when, from that point on, is when the game gets good for me. But that initial objective, because it has that big fuck-off fetch side quest in the middle of it, that takes you off to, God knows where, doing all kinds of crap. And even when you go off on the side quest, there's plenty of opportunity for a story to begin. And Atreus wants there to be a plot. He's saying, please, Dad, can we start the story now? And Kratos is going, no, boy, shush. The matters here don't concern us. We just get what we came for and leave. There were so many points where the game itself was trying to give you a story. And Kratos as a character was just like, nah, don't want it yet. You wait until we complete our first objective, and then we'll get the story. And it was bizarre. I don't know. Do you
think is that it being self-aware, or is that it being completely ignorant?
I think it's ignorant. I think it's trying to be self-aware, but in the wrong way. I think it's trying to say, no, let's not get distracted with this stuff going on here, because people care about, the main focus. And if we divert and start doing this other thing, it might frustrate people. But there was no main focus yet. There was just an objective, as I said. It feels like it was trying to be self-aware in the way that it was saying we don't want to frustrate people like other games do by sending you off on this other story when we haven't tied up the first one yet, but they hadn't started the first main story yet.
Right.
Yeah, it was really just, I don't know. I mean, I don't know. To be honest, I think it was still the right call. I wouldn't have enjoyed the story Atreus was trying to get involved in. None of it, it was very, generic seeming. So I think it was still the right call for Kratos to be like, no, we're not going to get involved in this. We're just going to press on. But it did just further delay any evidence that this game... Because at this point, there had been nothing, is what I guess you have to bear in mind. By this point, there had been nothing. So it further delayed the possibility that this game was ever going to have a plot. To me, at this point, I was still just like, when's it starting? When's this game going to start? Oh, here, it's going to start. Oh, no, it's not. It never started. I was waiting about 8 hours for this game to start, and that's not great. So that ties into the final thing, which I wasn't going to talk about at all until Reagan mentioned the platinum. And you, Abe, backing it up, saying you want to finish a game and look back on it and have, the fond memories of it, and not burn yourself out on it by grinding for that platinum.
Yep.
And this is a comparative thing rather than a purely isolated review at this point, but the original God of War games destroyed this one in terms of the platinum, because the platinum was play it, on the hardest difficulty, fully upgrade all your gear. And upon doing those things, you would also get every single other trophy, so you would get the platinum. You probably wouldn't play it on hardest the first time, but you might play it on normal, wait a few years and then be like, oh, actually, I feel like playing that game again. And then you would just put it up to the hardest to get that last trophy and be done with it. Because in the old God of War games, upgrading your gear was just done through those red orbs, which you got from killing shit. So you did it by the end of your first playthrough kind of thing. Whereas in this one, because there are side quests, because there's a collectathon, because there's all this grinding and XP and silver, I've forgotten what the currency's called.
Hack silver?
Hack silver. It is a grind. So to, I guess, 100% finish this game is not going to be as enjoyable an experience as 100%ing every previous God of War game was, because it requires grind, and none of the previous ones ever did. They never required anything other than play through the story and enjoy it.
Yeah.
And I think that's the big thing, is this game is an 8 out of 10 for me, because it is great. By the end of this game, it is phenomenal. It is, if it was the quality it is at the end, the whole way through, 10 out of 10, I would understand every review about it. But it's about, 15 hours long, and it takes 7 to 8 to get to the point where it's a 10 out of 10.
Right.
So with that much dilly-dally, shilly-shally at the start, that's serious point deduction. I can't... It seems like reviewers consider pros in games to be additive. Good story, check, gets that box. Good gameplay, check, gets that box. And if it ticks all the boxes, it gets a 10 out of 10. They don't seem to keep in mind how long it takes to tick that box and whether or not the journey to reach that point was enjoyable. And this is a prime example of a game where it ticks all the boxes, but the time it takes to get to some of those boxes actually makes the game less enjoyable. So it's an 8 for me. Solid at the end, and when I look back on it, I'm like, I enjoyed my time with that game, but I'm not going to get the platinum, and I'm probably never going to play it again because I don't want to go through that start again. I don't want to have that boring entry to the game again. So I really hope that they build upon what it was at the end for the sequels, because there's obviously going to be more. And that, it just carries through the quality that it was at the end right through all the rest of the games. And then no doubt in my mind, this is going to be a superior franchise to the previous God of War franchise. But at the moment, with just this entry, I don't think it's better. It's different, and by the end of it, it's very good, but there were some missteps.
Right. Well, we should probably move on for God of War, but I've got 2 burning questions that I really want to ask. One is related to exactly what you just talked about. So the first, let's say, 7 hours, as you mentioned, because the last part of the game is so expertly crafted and phenomenal, do you see that first part as filler? Would you be able to remove that? Would you be able to abridge that without tarnishing, without the end game seeming so excellent?
I think you could do a lot to the start. I think you could remove a lot to make the game better as a whole. Yep. Not all of it, because, like I said, that first objective, while just an objective, is what starts the main journey and the story. So it's still required that objective exists and that you fulfill it, but you could remove 90% of the journey to the objective and just give you an A to B straight line to get there. Streamline that whole thing down from 7 hours to 1, maybe 2 hours, so you can still get that experience Reagan had with enjoying, seeing how the world worked and how it was going to open up and how the game was going to play, and basically act as a tutorial for 1 or 2 hours. And then it could be forgiven for not introducing the story at that point, because it was really just teaching you the game and how it worked. I just think it dragged out too long. So I think, it probably is a game that could have profited from some heavy editing at the start, and it would have been painful editing. They would have not liked having to remove the amount they would have had to, I think, to streamline it enough to be a 10 for me. But I think it needed a bit more hard hand editing at the start.
Because I imagine that first part is a lot, or I imagine this whole game is probably character building the game. Am I correct in that assumption?
Yeah, it is. It's very much developing the relationship between Atreus and Kratos, and there is. Again, it's why I say they, would really hate to edit some of that entry out, because there is a big conflict between the two of them that starts, boils, and then gets resolved during that opening 7 hours. But that doesn't change the dynamic. I didn't feel like after they'd resolved that conflict, they were in a better place than they were before the conflict ever happened. Right. They were just kind of back to the relationship they had at the start. So I feel like, again, it wasn't necessary. It was good, as far as development goes, but it wasn't development that actually changed how they interacted. So I don't think it was necessary.
Right. Okay, we should move on. I got one more question though, and this one will be shorter. Before the game came out, I was very excited in the idea. They sort of floated the idea of you having to almost learn a language or learn runes and being able to decipher things you come across using information you've previously
Disappointing.
picked up.
Yeah,
That's the answer to your question.
Yep, agreed.
You literally just find, you open every now and again, you open a chest and it'll be like, oh, a piece of the cipher. And that's it. And then once you've got all the pieces of the cipher, you can read them.
So
it's not
you
a thing
don't
at all.
have to. You don't have to use your. You don't have to sort of look at a screen, look at the shape of this character hieroglyph or whatever.
You as a player do nothing because Kratos is illiterate and you are Kratos. Atreus does it all.
Oh man.
Yeah, no, it's not a thing at all.
That's really disappointing to me because I really liked that idea when they flung that around, because it reminded me of something like The Witness, in which you had to take a photograph on your cell phone of some puzzles and use that, or take a screenshot or whatever, and use those algorithms or that piece of information you've learned wasn't sort of ingrained. There wasn't just going to be an auto fill in the game for it, sort of thing. So that's really disappointing. But oh well, it sounds like a pretty damn good game otherwise.
It's a good game.
Good game.
It's a great game.
Well, Balthazar, you've been playing a few other things, so do you want to touch on the rest of your stuff, man?
Yeah, I'll just go through. I've actually played a hell of a lot of games, but I'm just going to touch on the other three that I've also played from start to finish. One of them, Reagan, you played as well a while ago. Final Fantasy 15 came out on PC, so I grabbed the Windows edition of it with all the DLCs and added content. And I'm glad I waited. I know a lot of people, when it came out, had the feeling that it was, unfinished. There were a lot of gaps in the story, and that it, all in all, was just rushed out and clearly incomplete. But the version of the game I played, I didn't get that feeling. I really enjoyed it. By the end of it, I'd had a great time. And there were just some parts in it which, like, the best parts in the game are parts that I know Regan hasn't played, and that sucks. It does suck that they waited until the PC, they had this content that wasn't in the core game because it either wasn't ready to ship yet, or maybe they removed it because of time constraints and just thought no one will notice. But in the version of the game that it is in, it's stellar content. The main part I'm referring to is right towards the end of the game when you're in 10 years in the future. And as I understand it, in the original console release, when you wake up, you basically go to the final boss fight, and that's it. You fight Ifrit, and then you fight purple hair dude, I've forgotten his name, and that's the end of the game. But in this version of the game, you go to that area, and it's another open world city area, and there are side quests in it, and you get a replica of the Regalia, your car, and you drive that around in it, and there's monsters to hunt, and there's more boss fights. You fight Cerberus to get in the gates, to fight Ifrit, to get into the tower, to fight the different historical kings who need you to prove that you're worthy before they'll let you confront the main boss. So there's more bosses as you climb up,
but
and you get more
go
weapons, and you get
That was my impression of the end of that game, was just like, oh, I've done that and that's it. Really? And yeah, with Final Fantasy games, you normally have to really got to push. Like, they're long games. And with that one, I was just like, oh, okay, it's done.
Yeah,
so
and I think that's
like,
it.
Yeah.
That's what they did with the Windows versions. They brought back the old, what do you call it? I guess the boss marathon that Final Fantasies are famous for. That, you move straight from boss fight to boss fight to boss fight, boss fight, boss fight, boss fight, boss fight, boss fight, and you never know when it's going to end. And what in a normal game would be, a 20-minute final level in a Final Fantasy game goes on for hours, and more bosses just keep popping up. And you're like, when does this stop? When do these things stop escalating and getting more ridiculous and more powerful? You go into it and the first boss is maybe level 60 and you're level 80 and you're like, whoops, I over-leveled a bit. But then by the time you get to the last boss, he's 90 and you're like, shit, I'm under-leveled. And yeah, it was great. It brought back that sort of nostalgic feeling of having not played a traditional Final Fantasy in a while. And this one is a far cry from traditional. It's gone for the more active action combat. But just the progression of the ending was great in this version. And the Armiger as well, the thing they did with it called Armiger Unleashed, where you basically fly around with all your kingly weapons floating around you, and you can teleport all over the place and initiate these huge combos. That was all removed from the original game as well and didn't exist. So yeah, it was weird that wasn't in it, and I can appreciate why people didn't like the original release, but with all this stuff, I really enjoyed it. The only thing I really want to touch on is the Prompto DLC quickly, because this was the best part of the game. It was fucking amazing. It was basically a combination of Metal Gear Solid 1 and Metal Gear Solid 3, but in Final Fantasy. So, Abe, tell me if this sounds familiar, right? So, factory, out in the middle of the snow.
Yep.
You're going in to basically find out what an evil organization is doing. You don't know what they're doing, but you know they're doing something there. The guards in the facility walking around it are genetically bred soldiers purely for the purposes of guarding this facility, like genome soldiers. Yep. And when you're in there, you find out that they're developing a super weapon with nuclear launch capabilities.
Yeah.
So the gameplay is third person sneaking, like basically you can play it as a third person shooter, or you can sneak your way around, stealth up behind people and instantly incapacitate them from behind. The final boss fight is Aranea. Is where the Metal Gear Solid 3 influence comes in. Aranea driving a snowmobile while you sit on the back of it with a mounted machine gun shooting at this giant robot that's coming after you. It's fucking awesome. It was so cool. It was like Hideo Kojima was like, "Hey guys, Konami have fired me. Can I make something for your game?" And they were like,
"That's exactly what I was gonna say." Yeah, Square Enix is just like, "Yeah, man, just come along. Yeah, give us like a week, chuck your ideas in a pot, and we'll do something with them." It
was honestly so good, and it had the best sort of moment from any of the games as well on a sort of character development and an emotional standpoint, where you find out that this character Prompto is actually one of those genetically bred soldiers who was supposed to be an MT, a Magitech trooper, but when he was still a baby, some of the good guys basically raided the facility and took a bunch of the kids away, which stopped them growing at an accelerated rate because they weren't in their kind of birthing tanks or whatever. So he grew up as a normal person with a normal life and didn't know that he was actually a genetic clone sort of soldier. So there's this great moment where these things are quite creepy looking. They have very plain faces, sort of masks with facial features on them, but they're, that really just gormless stare kind of thing. And there's this moment where there's one lying on the ground and it's kind of dying, and it's looking up and it looks horrifying. And in the rest of the game, it's just one of these things, these robots, and you just step on it, but then it kind of cuts to Prompto's, how he sees it with his knowledge, and it's, him reaching up to himself, pleading to please put him out of his misery and save him, and he just can't take it, and he kind of runs away crying sort of thing, because he's realized that all these things that you've spent the whole game slaughtering, that in any other light are these horrific monstrosity machines with arms barely held together with one or two screws, and they're really quite creepy the way they kind of sprint at you and lurch around and everything. Are him. They're all him inside these suits of armor kind of thing. And that again was a very Hideo twist. Like it was this whole DLC felt like it wasn't Square. It honestly felt like Hideo had made it, and I fucking loved every moment of it. So Reagan, I know you have the core game, so if it's ever on sale, I recommend just picking up that one DLC to play it, because it was the best part of the game by far.
Cool.
Yeah, really good. After that, I played God of War, then Bayonetta 2 on Switch, because I picked them both up a while ago, and I played the first one, and then I waited for a while to play the second one.
Nice.
So I played that from start to finish, and it was actually really great playing it after God of War, because I don't think I would have picked up on it if I hadn't just played God of War. You're basically playing alongside, there's a dude called Balder in it who you're playing with, and you're climbing up Fimbulventa, which is a mountain, to try and fight the Aesir gods, and it's basically it's God of War, but Bayonetta. It was, it was funny because Bayonetta was always God of War, but with a female protagonist. It's like a mixture of God of War and Devil May Cry, but with a female protagonist. And so it was funny that Bayonetta 2 was, however many years ago, and was actually sort of an imitation of the new God of War, but before it came out. So it's almost like, it was inspired by the original series, but then the new God of War reboot kind of thing almost feels like it was inspired by the direction that Bayonetta went in with number 2. So that was interesting. It was a great game. I prefer the gameplay to the new God of War. And I know that's going to rub 99% of the internet the wrong way, but I just prefer when you get new weapons constantly every 10 minutes and it changes your gameplay style and you get to, break into each thing and really delve into what it can do. And the final thing, Abe, Donkey Kong Country Tropical Freeze, which I know you're really looking forward to.
Yes.
I never played the Wii U original, so this isn't a comparison, it's purely as is. I think this might be the best looking game on Switch.
Wow.
It is just so crisp, so perfectly rendered. The models are incredible. They look like they've got real hair. Like the fur on their bodies isn't the, Donkey Kong hair of old, which is just grey Play-Doh. Yeah, it's, brown, sorry. It's actually, it's hair, and it looks amazing. Which then is really funny, because then you see someone like Dixie, and her ponytail does still look like yellow Play-Doh. But the fur is done on their bodies is done incredibly. The 3D models are great. You can tell that they... I don't know. It's brilliant. The backgrounds are, lovingly rendered. It's really crisp. 60 FPS, 1080p, whether it's handheld or docked. It carries it across. It runs perfectly. It looks incredible. And if you like those platforms, I'm not a fan of platformers. This one was just that good. Is it notoriously difficult, Tropical Freeze? Have you found it quite challenging? I think the most challenging part was playing it co-op with Hannah, because we would get in each other's way constantly. It's one of those games where if you're playing it by yourself as DK, you probably make it through relatively easily, but then there are parts, for example, that it changes for multiplayer that require you to work together to get across.
Right.
So there'll be parts where, for example, I would jump onto a vine to swing, and let's say Hannah was Diddy, so she'd jump and do the kind of jetpack glide across to the side, and then I'd jump at the end of the vine, swing, and then we'd realise that there was no platform, it was too far away, so actually I needed to put her on my back so I could then jump to the vine, swing across, jump at the end of that, and then she hits jump to hit her jetpack, and we glide across from there, kind of thing.
Wow.
And there's stuff like that which is really cool, and I definitely recommend playing it co-op if you have someone you can play it with for those sorts of things. But boy, did we churn through those lives. Like every time we, start anew on a different day and we'd load our save file, Funky Kong would pop up and go, "Hey, you guys suck. Have some lives on me." Like, he wouldn't say it like that, but it was blatantly, "You're not doing very well. Here's some extra life." Because every time we'd load the save file, we'd have maybe like 2 lives, and he'd be like, "Man, you guys, here, just have 20. Like, you're going to need them." It was really fucking hard. But there were only a few points that were just frustratingly hard. For the most part, it was just like you immediately saw what you did wrong. It was just either a timing thing or, whatever. It was human error. But there were a couple of parts where it felt unfair. It was still human error. It required precision, but... It felt almost like the game could load incorrectly sometimes, where the window for you to jump through, let's say there's a door opening and closing really quickly, so you've got to get through there while it's open, but the game might have loaded in a way that every time that short window where it's open, there's an enemy blocking the door which can't be killed. And if you die and then the game reloads, you see that actually the enemy has a different path this time than it had last time. And this time, its path does actually leave that open. So it felt like a lot of the times, not a lot of the times, it didn't happen very often, but it did feel like every now and again, we weren't the fault of the death. It was like, it feels
Random
like at
chance.
the moment, the game has actually loaded in a way that we cannot progress. We need to have it reload this area kind of thing. But aside from those, no, great, fantastic. Definitely pick it up when you can. It is unfortunate about the price tag, considering it's a remake or a remaster, but at the same time, it's a Nintendo game, so it's never going to decrease in price. So just swallow it when you can.
Yeah. Let me ask you, Balthazar, is it, playing it with a co-op partner, is that going to, were there times where you turned on each other, or was it more helping each other kind of thing? What came higher?
So the thing is, it's hard for there to be times where you can turn on each other purely because the way the respawn system works is the person who's dead can tap A whenever they want to, and they come back down in a barrel.
Right.
So the times where it got frustrating is to get your partner to respawn when they're coming down in the barrel, the person who's alive has to hit the barrel. So sometimes...
Yes, I remember this from the previous one.
Yeah, sometimes Hannah would press A or I would press A and we'd be floating back down and the other person would have already jumped off the platform and be moving away. And so then it would become this thing of you would die because if you just kept going and then maybe jumped back, you know, you could probably get it, or maybe you wouldn't get it, but then they just have to use another life and come back. But because you notice halfway through the air they're coming down, you try to do that 180 turn in the air and go back, which is just physically impossible because of momentum, and you just fall to your death, and then the life that the other person used to start coming down has been used, but then because you just died, you both need to respawn, so now you've just used 3 lives to get one person back. And when that happened, the blame would often fall on the person who decided to drop in midair for no reason. But yeah, it definitely, you can turn, it can get frustrating, but at the same time, I feel like that added to it. Like, I absolutely recommend playing it with someone else, because even those moments when you turn just make the game as a whole more fun, because it's just so funny to, you know, suddenly realize again, after you just went to the shop and spent all your coins on 50 lives, that you've got 1 left and Funky Kong's showing up to throw you a bone again because you suck.
Man, see, that's why I love Donkey Kong, because all throughout my life when I've played a Donkey Kong game, it is brutally punishing. Like, if you fuck up, you're dead. There's no second chance at all. And it also punishes you for being greedy, which I really like as well. Like, I can remember particularly Donkey Kong Country 2. There's a level called Red Hot Ride, and you're going over lava on these hot air balloons. And there's circles of bees that they just put in, you know, you have to like glide through them or up or down or whatever, go over these hot air, vents of hot air and make your balloon rise or sink. And every now and then there'll just be like a ridiculous amount of bees with like 1 banana in the middle. And you're like, damn, I really want that banana just because it's a collectible. So my brain's like, yeah, I really want that you know, that sense of accomplishment. I really want that banana. And I'll risk it all on this 1 banana and, you know, always die and then just think I'm an absolute moron. Like, and I love that. I love how it's a rare game, so it's got that British self-deprecating thing inbuilt into it, which I really, really love. That's like half of my love of the DK series, is that it's just relentlessly like, no, you're a terrible human being, try again.
Awesome. Yeah, no, that's absolutely made it untarnished into Tropical Freeze. It also, I will say, I've not played other Donkey Kong games outside of, was it Donkey Kong 2, Diddy's Kong Adventure?
Diddy's Conquest.
Yeah, that was the one. Yep. And that one was the only the previous one I'd played. So I don't really have a lot of experience with it, but I will say that the soundtrack of this game was phenomenal.
David Wise.
It was an incredible soundtrack.
Yeah, firing on all cylinders. I haven't been able to, you know, not spoil myself from the soundtrack. I've been listening to that bad boy for months. And my goodness, there's a song called Seashore War. One of the best songs I've ever heard in my life. David
Wise actually came out and said that's his favourite track he's ever made as well.
Oh, man, I'm not surprised. That thing like hits you like a ton of bricks, eh? It's
when you're playing the game, it hits you more, because that's one that I heard before I played the game as well. And I was like, my God, this might be one of my favourite pieces of music. And it's from fucking Donkey Kong, what? Yeah. But then we actually play it and you realise why it's, you know, got that kind of slower, sadder tone to it. And you're actually walking through the level to that music. It's actually like it hits you. It's really well done.
Man, it's that beautiful melancholy. They have it with Stickerbush Symphony from the previous from Donkey Kong Country, Diddy's Conquest as well. There's a song called Stickerbush Symphony, which just like tugs at the heartstrings hard. Reagan, it's the feeling of the Skellige soundtrack, The Fields of Ard Skellig, that song.
Right.
It's a similar vibe to that. It's intense, man. Like absolutely beautiful piece of music.
It's interesting.
This everything I got out of Tropical Freeze is basically that I'm going to main Donkey Kong when Smash comes out on. I love him now. Man.
Yep, he's my go-to. He's always my go-to. What were you going to say there, Reagan?
I was just going to say it's kind of interesting how they play off these like, you know, pretty light-hearted platformers where you're playing as a fucking ape.
Monkey collecting bananas.
Yeah, exactly. With this real intense music. It's an interesting idea. It's good.
I think it's beautiful. David Wise, I actually I mentioned him. What did I say? I said something on Twitter. I said listening to DK Tropical Freeze soundtrack is the equivalent of a hot cup of tea on a cold morning for my ears. And he responded to that tweet, and I was over the moon.
That's awesome.
I was very stoked with that. Anything else, Balthazar?
I will quickly mention, so I've been playing a lot of things, as I said, but I feel like it's weird because we haven't talked about this on a podcast at all, and I've spent way too many hours on it, is that I'm still jamming several hours of Fortnite every day. That game, man. Hooked.
Yeah, my opinion changed dramatically on that game when we played it together.
Yeah.
I was in by the end.
So yeah, still playing that with some friends on a pretty much daily basis, and it just doesn't seem to be getting old. Every now and again it gets a little bit, I'm like, okay, I need to take a day off or 2 days off, but then as soon as I jump back in again, I'm like, no, I'm in, let's go. Let's go hard. We drop and tilted.
Well, funny side anecdote on that. When I sold my PlayStation, I sold it to a bloke with 4 games, and those were The Witcher 3, The Fractured Butthole, Wolf Among Us, and Until Dawn. And I sold it to him, and I was messaging him on Facebook because we did the old Facebook buy and sell. And I was like, yeah, man, because I was selling it, I had an ad for the price for the console only and the controller, and the price with the console and the controller and the games. And I asked him if he wanted the games, and he's like, yeah, I suppose. And then when I met up with him in person, I was like, so these games are like, I told him about Witcher 3, how awesome it was, and he's like, yeah, man, do you have Fortnite? I was like, oh. I know why you want it,
like, mate,
which is fine. Which is absolutely, yeah. It's a free to play game, and it's obviously an incredibly well made free to play game. But I was kind of a bit, a little bit annoyed that he wasn't gonna even try one of the best games ever made, i.e., The Witcher 3.
Amazing.
He was just gonna play Fortnite, but different strokes for different folks, so it's all good. But yeah, I think we'll move on to our movies in a minute segment, which I think, Balthazar, you're going to be helming this one.
Ooh, I've seen 2.
A couple, yeah.
And so, like last time when I'd seen however many or whatever we'd done, I'm going to just mash them together. Give me a minute, and I will try it. I'll give you a convoluted synopsis of both movies in one.
Okay,
very
cool.
good.
Give me 1 second.
All
right. Okay.
You got the timer. You got the timer there, Reagan?
I've got our timer sorted.
Sweet.
So without further ado, let's just dive right into it. Your time begins now.
All right, there's a mad titan who's on a quest to collect 6 different stones and put them in a glove. But all the stones are in different locations, so he sets out to find them, one of which crashes into an enclosure and hits an albino white ape called Charlie or something. George, maybe. Who's best friends, once again, with Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson. So Dwayne removes the stone from the ape, but it's too late. It's already sort of infected his body, and he starts to grow out of control and becomes massive. The Mad Titan learns of this. He's already collected all the other stones, so he comes to get that one, and there's an epic battle between him and Dwayne. This is the one time that Dwayne comes up against someone more masculine than him, more muscular, and he just can't win. So the Mad Titan takes the stone, he puts that in his glove along with all the others, and then he goes to click his fingers and destroy everything, but before he can, the giant ape comes down and beats him up along with a crocodile and a flying wolf.
Well, I know both the movies you're talking about there, but do you just want to fill people in?
So it was, of course, Rampage and Marvel's Infinity War. Both good films.
I'm going to break our usual rule of we just move on straight away and that's the end, because I'm really curious to know about one of these films, and it's not Infinity War. I want to know about Rampage, man, because I saw the trailer for Rampage and I couldn't figure out what this movie was. It was The Rock, as you mentioned, with this albino ape, and the ape gets a canister that sort of infects him, and then towards the end of the trailer, the giant flying wolf jumped out, and I was like, no. And he's like, they're on a rampage. I was like, no, this can't possibly be. And then it's like, Rampage. I was like, good God, they made a movie out of that PlayStation 1 game.
So, yeah, it literally is. It's going into that game, but giving it a bit of a backstory to give it, feet as a film.
Right.
Basically, the backstory is simply in space, because, you can't do illegal government experiments on Earth. So in space, they were working on some serum that fused what's that word? It's actually a real thing. CRISPR, is it? That like
What?
fuses genes from one animal into another animal to try and create a super animal that's
like a
that's
chimera.
weaknesses are made up for by traits from this other thing. So basically they create this thing which is just going to give animals super regenerative properties and stuff like that. But it wasn't quite ready, so when it got put in something, it also just made it grow at an accelerated rate out of control, because while it was sort of restoring everything, it was also just building up on it and making it stronger so it couldn't be damaged again, so it was just expanding infinitely, pretty much. And yeah, the space station gets overrun and destroyed by a rat that they give it to, which just becomes a massive fucking thing. And yeah, they crash down into Earth and land in different locations. One in like a tundra where a wolf gets one, one in the water and a crocodile gets it, and then one lands in this animal preserve where the only albino ape known gets infected by it.
Amazing.
And yeah, from after that point, it just becomes the game Rampage, where they're giant and they're walking through the city destroying things. But yeah, eventually sort of the reason they're going to the city is because this building's doing a signal to draw them all in so that they can try and weaponize them basically by using this signal. So Dwayne goes into the city, deactivates the signal, reminds George that they're best friends again, and then he and George go and kill the other two. But no, it's great. It's a surprisingly funny film. The monkey has some of the funniest lines in the movie. He never says anything. He has some of the funniest bits in the movie. Because he likes to play jokes on Dwayne. They like have a back and forth, and they kind of use sign language and stuff, and they like to play jokes on each other. And no, he just has these great, I say lines because, he's signing words and stuff, but the monkey is the best written character in the movie.
Oh man, I'm so down for it. Like, I don't really want to pay for this, but I do want to watch it, so I might wait till it comes on demand and check it out. Because
that's the thing. Now that Reading's back up in Wellington at $10 a movie, I'm just like, yeah, I'll go see anything. Why not?
Oh yeah, man. The closest Reading to me is like 5 suburbs away, and it takes about 40 minutes to get there, so
yeah,
they're not gonna do that anytime soon. But I'm pumped. I really, it sounds like dumb fun, and I can only imagine how much how much of a good time it must have been writing that screenplay.
Yeah,
they're just like, well, it's a stupid fucking movie, so anything goes. You can make a giant rat invade a space station. Why not? Like, that's great.
It's a great movie. Definitely, I think you'd really enjoy it. Honestly, just for the Dwayne monkey relationship, that's 90% of the movie.
I remember when my opinion on Dwayne Johnson changed, and when he first came into the cinema game, I was, of course, like, what the hell's this? Wrestlers acting, this is terrible. And to be fair, most of the movies he started with were pretty bad. Once he got into Fast and the Furious 5, I think it was the first one he was in, I was in. I was like, dude, you have one of the best smiles I've ever seen.
Yeah.
You have charisma coming out, the ears. You elevate every scene. You make me feel joy in every scene you're in. What the hell, man? Like, you deserve to be in everything. Just put this guy in every movie.
Yeah, he learned his strengths, right? Because I had the exact... I remember thinking back, it was actually after watching Rampage, and I was like, man, remember when The Rock first started acting, and he was still The Rock? He wasn't Dwayne Johnson, because people only knew him as, a wrestler.
Yeah.
And then I kind of realized where, I guess, it's not necessarily that my opinion of him changed. It is that he just recognized his strength. Because ultimately, he was always an actor. Professional wrestling is acting. It's just incredibly hammy acting, hamming it up for the crowd. And I think as soon as he realized that was his strength, and that's what he'd been doing all this time, and translated that into going for incredibly cheesy, hammy roles, that was when he just became like the top box office actor, was when he was just playing to what he'd always been doing and the strengths that he'd been working on for years and that everyone loved him for.
Yeah, I think he just makes people feel good, Like, he doesn't even have to have his physical, body in the movie. Like, say, Moana, he's a voice actor in that as Maui. And he probably the best character in the entire film. It's amazing. The charisma just sort of comes through him in general, and it's I don't know, it's phenomenal. Like I would consider, I studied film, I consider myself a film aficionado, but I think he's amazing, and I think he should be in everything.
He should, absolutely.
Great presence to have. So I think that's about it for the movies in the minute segment. So we'll move into some news. And Reagan, I think you wanted to talk about some upcoming game releases, did you?
Yeah, I thought it might be a good idea to sort of finish up the podcast this week, as we've done the last couple, with kind of whipping through the list of games. And this is probably not an exhaustive list, but just having a think about what's coming up soon and kind of getting on that hype train, which is something that I'm all about. So let's just run through a list, and if you guys have any thoughts on any of these, then pipe up. So we're obviously drawing near the end of May, which is in itself is fucking crazy. But a few things to mention for the end of May. So this next week, there's a few games coming out that'll be interesting. So let's just whip down the list. Space Hulk Deathwing. Which sounds
everyone's favorite.
Sounds like Hulk in space, which is great. Tennis World Tour. Awesome.
Still, that game title, man, like that can't be any more boring. Like, to me,
Agreed.
It's just there's not even a word like redemption or anything in there.
Are you gonna do a 180 again like last time? Where you talked yourself around to being like, actually, I love it. It's the best title.
Maybe it is the best title. If it was just, I wish that those sports games were just called tennis, like they were back on the Atari. Just called soccer or football or tennis or golf. Great. Anyway, continue.
Dylan's Dead Heat Breakers.
Oh man, I remember seeing this one on the Nintendo Direct. That weird crocodile RPG with the sort of aspects of Final Fantasy, but it's also a racing game.
Good mix. Blood-Stained Curse of the Moon, which is coming out on everything. On May 24th, Dark Souls Remastered on PS4, Xbox One, Switch, and PC on the 25th.
That one's coming to Switch. I might actually pick that up.
It's not coming to Switch on the 25th, though. It needs to be clarified. It got delayed by a month because of reasons. I don't know why. I'm assuming just performance or a porting issue. It's delayed by a month, though, and I would strongly recommend anyone out there who's thinking of picking it up, if you have a Switch, get it on Switch, because it sounds like the other versions are just, they're not really better than the original was. Even the textures and graphics and everything and performance, it's all exactly the same. So literally, if you already own it, the only reason to rebuy it would be for the portability factor on Switch.
Nice.
Really? Is it one of those controversies like the Arkham trilogy where they haven't really done much and everyone's up in arms about it?
Yeah, well, the reason people are up in arms so much is because basically the PC version in particular performs and looks worse than the previous version of the game because the Steam Workshop had so many mods and everything to make it run better and look better. But those mods don't work on the new version, and From Software did a very clever thing where if you buy this, they removed the old version from Steam, so you can't get it anymore, you can only get the new one. And if you download and install the new one and then decide, actually, I don't like it as much and want to go back to the old one, it's overwritten all your files and your executables and everything, so you can never actually access the old one again, legitimately.
Wow, that is very underhanded.
So it is a bit of a controversy because, basically they've released a product that's not as good as the one that was already on the market, unlike the, I hate to bring it up, Skyrim ultimate version that PC people got for free if they already owned the original version. When the remaster came out, they got that for free. They're making you pay $60 again on PC for it, and it's worse. So it's a bit of a controversy. But that said, all the reviews still say it's a Souls game. If you liked it, you'll still like it. So if you do want to pick it up again, Switch is the perfect way to go because it's never been portable before.
Do you guys reckon if I picked up Skyrim on Switch, could I finish it in the 32 hours that I'm going to be flying to get to Scotland?
I doubt
Define
it.
finish.
Yeah, but I mean,
the main story.
I think you could. The main story, for sure.
I've never finished Skyrim. I just sort of mucked about in it for, 90 hours, and then I was like, all right, I had fun with that.
I do want to, I think you probably could finish the main storyline, but I do question the idea of spending money on Skyrim again.
Yeah, I know. Or I had bought it. I bought it on PC, but I paid like $3 for it on Steam on a Steam sale.
Nice.
And my computer obviously could never run it, so I just bought it for later.
Yeah.
But I before that I borrowed a friend's Xbox 360 was it? Yeah, Xbox 360 version. And we just took turns. We worked different shifts, so I played it whenever he wasn't home, and he played it whenever I wasn't home.
Awesome. Continue on the list. Detroit Become Human.
I'm very intrigued by this.
Yes, May 25th. I do know people who have pre-ordered this.
Oh wow!
Yeah, so it sounds.
Who are they? Are they sort of? You've mentioned you work with a lot of people. Casual games, gotcha.
Casual games.
Yep.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
But looks cool.
That's really weird. I'm just baffled by the idea of someone of Detroit appealing to someone who isn't really hardcore into gaming, and I'm trying to not come off like an elitist here. What do you think it appeals to people outside of
I wasn't a huge gamer when Heavy Rain came out, and that appealed to me massively, and I was casual back then. But then again, they're marketing them completely differently. Heavy Rain was marketed as a game that you could literally play through over 100 times and see a completely different ending every time, because every single element of the game changed based on every single decision you ever made. And that was a massive overstatement. Like, there were a lot, I think there were like 42 different endings. So, there were a lot of different endings you could get. But every time you finished it, you got sort of 4 to 5 of the endings, because there were the different characters. So I don't know, like, that appealed to me, so I get it, but at the same time, this isn't being... Oh, actually, it kind of is being marketed that way again, because all the ads and everything have that weird, spider web of stuff linking up and being like, which choices will you make, and which path will you follow, and all that stuff.
I think this one's more about the granular choices than the endings. And people are kind of intrigued by that, and also like just the content of it, like the whole AI and exploring those ideas sounds really cool as well. I think it looks good. I think could be great. Yeah.
David Cage can do no wrong. He's never made a misstep in his career, so I'll probably pick it up.
Nice.
Oh man. Well, the only thing I know, sorry, Reagan. The only thing I know about the marketing that I've seen for Beyond Human, Become Human, is I was getting Beyond Two Souls and this new one mixed.
Beyond Two Souls free on PS Plus this month.
It is indeed, yeah. The only thing I've seen in terms of marketing is the massive controversy that they had about the sort of sexual abuse part of the game that kind of involves or domestic abuse / sexual abuse that involves a child, and everyone was getting kind of a bit pissed off about that, rightly so. And David Cage was like, "Look, I'll handle it with care." Everyone's like, "Oh, I don't know, you have a good track record with that, mate. Like, if we can trust you with that one." But I'm intrigued to see what becomes of this game.
I think one of his statements was, "I didn't make this world we live in. I'm just what was it? I'm just showing you the truth," or something.
Oh man, that is some
classic David Cage
bullshit.
statement.
Yeah, it is classic.
Nice. All right, pushing on with the list. Agony on May 29th.
I'm intrigued by that as well. It's supposed to be the most violent... It's claiming to be the most disturbing game of all time or something like that. It looks pretty piss to me, to be honest. I've seen trailers for it and I've seen a bit of gameplay and stuff. Doesn't look that interesting to me, but yeah. Oh.
Nice. Everspace on the 29th. Legend of K Anniversary on May the 29th. Moonlighter on May the 29th.
Would you say Legend of, would you say it's the Special K edition?
Legend of K
Special edition of Legend of K?
Yeah,
Special
definitely.
K edition?
If
Nice.
they sold that in Kellogg's Special K boxes, I'd be down. Sega Mega Drive Classics on PS4 and Xbox One on May 29th, and then Street Fighter 30th Anniversary Collection on May 29th for everything.
Ooh.
So that's all. That's May. There's some interesting wee tidbits to finish off the month there, and then June. Getting into next month. Let's whip through this nice and quick. So, Blaze Blue Cross Tag Battle, which is quite a short name for a Blaze Blue game. I thought they had to be like 300 characters in the name of one of those.
It's because it's not 100% Blaze Blue. I actually have this on Switch because you can download it from the Japanese store, and it's in 100% English because the English localized version already exists. So you download it, and then you access it on your European account, and it's in full English, fully voiced, fully everything in English. And it's probably because it's not 100% BlazBlue. It also has Persona characters in it and characters from Rooster Teeth's show Ruby, and a whole load of other stuff. It's just a big mashup of popular gaming icons in a fighter together. And it's the Dragon Ball Fighter Z style of gameplay. So I predict it's probably going to do pretty damn well.
Cool.
Nice.
The Elder Scrolls Online Somerset, which I'd imagine my partner would be pretty excited about, on June 5th.
Is that a expansion or something?
Yeah. So they've done a Morrowind one, and they have this is so Somerset. I guess is just I think it's another region. Pass.
I actually had a question for her about this. Is she excited for it? As someone who likes Elder Scrolls, does she care about Elder Scrolls lore and the fact that Somerset is an island that's locked off to outsiders and has never in the history of the Elder Scrolls universe been opened up, and they've said they're never going to open it up to allow outsiders in because that's just egregious to the culture and completely against it?
I actually haven't had a good conversation with her about it, to be honest. But
do it after the pod and report back.
Yeah, good. I will. On Rush on June 5th. And then now this next one is a game I'm particularly excited about. Shaq Fu, A Legend Reborn. Not because I know anything about Shaq Fu, but because I really wanted it to be a kung fu game with Shaquille O'Neal in it. But I don't think that's the case. June 5th.
Well, I believe it kind of is. It's a platformer from the early 90s probably, I would say. I think it was Super Nintendo and Sega Master System. And it's a platformer where I'm pretty sure you control Shaq. I imagine a pretty fucking misleading advertising if you don't.
Oh, is it actually? Oh, gosh.
I'm pretty sure that's what Shaq Fu is. Yeah, that's an older game that obviously they're redoing.
Amazing. Cool. Well, maybe I'll get that then. Vampire on PS4, Xbox One, PC, June 5th. I think when you say that name, you have to say Vampire, like that.
Right.
MotoGP 18, if you're into motorcycles. Flashback Remastered Edition on Switch on June 7th. Sushi Striker, The Way of Sushido.
Oh, man. And I remember that one from the Nintendo Direct as well. It looked like a mobile game, and I was not.
It has an insane plot, though. Have you, seen the stuff for it? It's, ridiculous. I hope it wins narrative of the year because it would be the most ridiculous game to get it, but it actually has an insane narrative and fully animated cutscenes and shit and really high hand-drawn detail, animated show style. It actually has my interest. It's piqued my interest.
Amazing. Just as a side note, I have Googled Shaq Fu and it is exactly what I hoped it would be, so I will be getting that.
Side-scrolling beat 'em up, right?
Yep, with Shaq.
Yep. Yeah. Perfect.
Which is amazing. Super Bomberman R on June 12th. Jurassic World Evolution, also on June 12th.
Now that's the new film, right? That's the name of the new film?
I believe so, yeah.
Jurassic World Evolution? Yeah, I'm not too sure. I'm really be following that.
Yeah. Lego The Incredibles on June 15th.
Yes, because the sequel's coming out soon.
Yeah.
Incredibles 2. Super hyped for that. First movie's so good.
Yeah. The Lego games are kind of for me, are just sort of on repeat, and I don't know, I think they're a bit boring. Where am I? Mario Tennis Aces, which is a tennis game that I would consider getting on June 22nd. New Gundam Breakers on June 22nd. Far Cry 3 Classic Edition on June 26th. Lumens Remastered on June 26th. I don't even know how to say this. It's YS8 Lacrimosa.
YS8 Lacrimosa of Dana.
Yeah, that's it. Nice. Good job. That's on the 26th. Crash Bandicoot Insane Trilogy on Switch, Xbox One, and PC on 26th, which is cool.
Yeah.
Obviously, the console exclusivity is coming of age on that. The Crew 2 on June 29th.
I'm actually kind of intrigued and slightly excited by The Crew 2.
Really?
Just because, yeah, I mean, have you seen the shit you can do now? You can literally turn into an airplane, be flying around for a while, and then turn into a car while you're in midair, and then turn into an airplane before you hit the ground again and go back up. I'm like, this is amazing. It's like Transformers mixed with some sort of Ubisoft nonsense. It's excellent.
Good.
I'm in.
And to finish the list is Wolfenstein-the, the new Colossus on Switch on June 29th. So next month is actually looking like it could be a pretty good month if there's games you're into. For those Elder Scrolls people, Somerset, Shaq Fu for me, and of course, let's not forget Sushi Striker, The Way of Sushido.
Sushido, yeah.
Yeah, it's looking like a good month, so look forward to that.
Very good, very good. Well, I think that's about us for this time around, boys. Anything else you guys want to discuss, get off your chests before we head off?
No, I feel like
No?
I'm good. I'm good. We're covered.
All right. Good stuff. Good stuff. Well, you can find us as per usual on all the social medias, on YouTube. What was the last stream we did? We did a Fortnite stream as the most recent one we've did, which was a lot of fun because we were all back in the same, house, let alone city, for once. So that was excellent. And I'm sure we'll get back onto that. I'm not sure when I will have a television again, and have a high-speed internet connection, but we'll you guys can probably keep doing them. Mike can jump in if need be, and we can continue those. But in the meantime, follow us on all social medias on overcastgamer.com, youtube.com/overcastgamer, and twitter.com/overcastgamer if you want to see my interaction with David Wise, which I was very happy about. And in the meantime, thank you for tuning in as per usual, and we will see you again sometime soon. I'm not sure when, but sometime soon.
At some stage. Goodbye.
Bye-bye.
Sashay away.